Good Wednesday afternoon to you. This is the first of two live videos that I am going to do today. We'll get through this first one, and then I'll take really about a 60-second break, and we'll be right back with a second monologue today. So we're just making sure everything is set, and we'll get started. Of course, Tom Cruise is back in the news because Top Gun Maverick is like the biggest blockbuster, not only of the summer, but really post-pandemic. And what Maverick did for movies, Hollywood really ought to be indebted to Tom Cruise. And I'm not a defender of Tom Cruise. I'm not a big Tom Cruise guy. I will say I saw the movie Maverick Top Gun, took my daughter to see it. We really enjoyed it. It was a great thrill ride. It is one of those cinematic experiences. You've got to watch it on the big screen, and even the flat screen in your living room can't do a movie like this justice. The flight sequences were absolutely outstanding. It's just a fun movie to watch. And so Hollywood, you better thank Tom Cruise because he made going back to the movies cool again. Give us good stories, give us some action, but it's got to have a good story. My daughter and I just saw Where the Crawdads Sing. I didn't know what we were going to see. She wanted to see it. I loved it. It was a great movie, and it's got a real twist at the end. I won't play spoiler alert here. I won't give it away. It was a great movie, and I thought about as I left the theater that night, something that Richard Dreyfuss said probably about 10 years ago in an interview that I watched, where he said, you know, we have all this new technology where we can make movies better than ever with the CGI and everything that we have at our disposal to literally, without having to go to a city and find an old neighborhood to recreate an old neighborhood feel for a time period piece, we can do all of that now with computers. And he says it's outstanding what we have at our disposal and what we can do now to make the movie experience even better. But he said there's one area that we're missing. Where are the good stories? We've got to tell good stories. We have lost the art of storytelling. So hats off to Tom Cruise and what Maverick and movies like Where the Crawdads Sing, and just bringing good stories back. And I said all that as a segue. In 2005, Tom Cruise, who we know is a big Christian Science guy, and is it Christian? No, he's not Christian Science. He's Scientology. I'm sorry. And of course, there's been all types of documentaries on what really goes on in Scientology. And he's really one of those guys, you know, mind over matter. I get it. But in 2005, he went on the Today Show with Matt Lauer, and he basically said that modern psychiatry, with all of their antidepressant drugs, is really what's killing America. And he said it was absolutely unconscionable that we were giving heavy narcotics to children. Now, he was lampooned, he was mocked, he was laughed at for that. And now we're finding out, well, some people are finding out, he was absolutely right. Now, I'm not going to deal with the aspect of adults and medication and depression. I will say that modern psychiatry way over-medicates most people that are coming in for treatment for emotional issues, a lot of which some good counseling and, yes, giving people some life coping skills would be much better than just open your mouth, swallow this pill. And that, of course, is what created the monster we call Big Pharma. Chris Rock, several years ago, did a great stand-up routine where he talked about, you know, America, or I should say the American government, is really not against drugs. They're just against the drugs you buy on the street that they aren't collecting any tax on. They don't want you to take those drugs. They want you to take these drugs. And Big Pharma got in bed with the government a long time ago. And understand, that these guys in their lab coats that cook up all of these new concoctions that they then want the American people, this is not about whether they're advancing our quality of life and making things better for us. No. See, that's liberal utopian wishful thinking nonsense. It's like thinking if the government just guarantees money for every young person to go to college, everybody will go and it'll be affordable. No, it won't. Once colleges figured out that they had a guaranteed supply of cash, guess what started going up? College tuition, college costs. And that put pressure on the government to start raising what they would give. And so in not giving it, but loaning it to kids, you have young people graduating college that are, $150,000, $200,000 in debt before they've even gotten their first real job. And most people, I don't care what profession you're in, I don't care how well trained you are, I don't care what your degrees are, you start out, even in your professional career, if you can get a job in that, at the bottom, which means you're at the bottom part of the pay grade. And you're starting out with $150,000, $200,000 in debt, and you got to probably get your first apartment, your first car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You understand when you start guaranteeing things, all you're guaranteeing now is the people that are doing the receiving, they know that money's going to be there. They're going to start raising the costs. If there wasn't a student loan program and colleges actually had to compete for money, the costs would come down. That's basic economics. Flip side, when people are programmed through TV commercials, I gotta have a pill, I gotta have a pill, I gotta have a pill. I got restless leg syndrome. I can't sleep at night. I got itchy hands. I've got eyebrows that sweat. Whatever it is, because you can't sit through any 2 hours of television and not get bombarded with at least 25 or 30 pharmaceutical products in that 2 hours. And they just keep mentioning stuff till they get to something you have. And then, aha, I've got to have a pill. Did you not see that was ultimately where the pandemic was going to take us? You're going to have love potion number 9. But this really got ramped up when we started giving kids Ritalin. Let me explain. I have been against this literally for decades. I served as the administrator of 3 different schools. I remember sitting in a meeting one day that I was invited to by our guidance counselor and a few other teachers that dealt with the special needs kids in our school. And the county was coming in and talking about some of the new programs that were available, etc. And of course, as these county educators are sitting there and they're giving their presentation and they're just, I call it, they throw out the initials, the ADD, ADHD, and they just throw all of this stuff out. And they're talking and talking and talking. And I'm just kind of sitting there like this and doodling on my legal pad in front of me. And one of the county psychologists looked at me and said, "You're not in agreement with us, are you?" I said, "No, everything you have just described in the behavior that requires this medical treatment, this medication, Ritalin, and there were other drugs, literally, that they were talking about giving these kids." I said, "You don't want to admit what the issue is here. It's not ADD, it's not ADHD, it's not a chemical imbalance, it's the fact that these are BOYS. These are boys, and boys learn differently than girls. The reason boys have a problem sitting still in school, the reason that boys, for the most part, yes, there are girls that also can be behavior problems in classrooms, but for the most part, it's usually about a 5-to-1 ratio. It's boys. Boys get bored. And when boys get bored, they start looking for ways to occupy themselves. Boys are not stimulated and they do not learn the same way that girls do. Now, I know for you liberals that are watching that are told there's 14 different genders and you can change your gender, that's all bullhock and that's actually anti-science. Complete anti-science. You know, when you talk about what is the boy, what is the girl? Well, one of the things you look at immediately is the fact that boys and girls do behave different, and it's not because of the way they've been programmed by society. That's another bunch of bullhawk. It is the psychological makeup that they have. Boys do think differently than girls. That is absolutely beyond question and provable. Girls can sit in class, they can listen to a lecture, they can write a couple of notes, they can watch an example on the blackboard, and then repeat and do what they were just shown. Boys, on the other hand, don't learn that way. Boys want to use more senses than just sit and stare. They want to feel and do. You take a group of boys, bring them into a gymnasium, and for the first time maybe, they're about to experience a game called basketball. Maybe these are a group of second grade boys. You don't sit them down on the floor and start to, quote, explain the rules of basketball to them. It doesn't work that way. You explain the game as you go, because the boys want to give me the ball, just tell me what I'm supposed to do, let me do it. Don't, even if I do it wrong, let me do it my way. Let me figure this out. This is why boys thrive at when they get stuff, whether it's toys, whether it's bikes, whatever. They got to touch it, they got to feel it, they got to break it, they got to pull it apart, they got to see how it works, and then they want to figure out how to put it back together again. And I'm not saying that girls don't learn that way and that girls don't like that. I am saying that for the most part, that is the way boys learn. Now, as they get older, as their brain develops and matures, yes, by the time they are in their high school years, by the time they are in their college years, they can sit and learn the same way that a girl does. The problem is that most educational programs are designed for the way females think and not the way males think. Oh, this ought to get some incredible feedback. But it's true, and especially at the elementary level, where, again, the teacher ratio is about 8-to-1 female teachers versus male teachers. So does it not make sense? That is the way the classroom environment is structured. I said all that to say this. The reason they wanted to pop pills into kids' mouths, and this is where Tom Cruise didn't get it. It's where even the people that are now saying Tom Cruise was right don't get it. This was done purposely to emasculate boys. Oh, you didn't hear me? I'll say it again. This was done purposely to emasculate boys. It's really no accident that we now have a generation of boys who don't know if they're boys, who are confused, bewildered, betwixt, between. See, there's now been a young generation of teachers coming in who were the kids that were on Ritalin, were on other psychiatric, mind-controlling substances, and now they're teachers. And now they're programming the next wave of kids that are on stuff. Is it any wonder they're confused? And again, this has all been done deliberately. What is it? Why is it that because a boy is a boy and he's bouncing off the walls and he's making the teacher, pull her hair out, really what she needs is steady, consistent discipline and routine with that young man, and he will begin to learn. But it's much easier, open your mouth and take this pill and sit there, and I will take all of the natural male instinct and aggressiveness out of you. That is being done on purpose. This is why we've got a generation today, you don't have to worry about a World War III and the United States being involved, because the vast majority of the males that age, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Go fight? These guys take to Twitter and TikTok because they're all stressed out. Somebody called them by the wrong pronoun. You really think they've got what it takes to actually go fight a war? We have, on purpose and by design, emasculated them. Because again, they're the wrong gender, they're the wrong race, and they are responsible for all of the oppression and racism in the world. Therefore, we have to neuter them. And it's only the next level of all of this hogwash that you've got people that now want to give boys hormone blockers. Ba-da-dum, ba-dum. See, when I started talking about this 10 years ago, people looked at me as if I was nuts. People looked at me as, oh, that crazy right-winger, that conspiracist. Well, turns out I was a conspiracist. I was just giving spoiler alerts. Because now we have this idea that we're going to give kids literally life-altering narcotics that will stop their bodies from developing normally and naturally. And some people are like, I can't believe it's gotten to this. I can't believe it's gotten to this. Well, why wouldn't it? 20 years ago, we were altering kids psychologically. Why wouldn't we now alter them biologically? Is any of this starting to click? You putting any of this together? Several years ago, when I was an administrator of a school in rural upstate New York, I was coming out of a convenience shop there in our town, and an old farmer was coming in, and he stopped me. He said, "Hey, you're the principal at," and I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I gotta ask you a question." He said, "I've got no scientific background," but he said, I've been a farmer my whole life, but he said, I do observe things. And he said, "I want to ask you a question," because he said, "I've got a daughter-in-law who's a teacher, and sometimes she and some of her friends, when they're at the house, they complain about the behavior of kids, in particular the boys, seem to be more out of control now than ever." And he said, "Have you noticed any of that at your school, that boys do seem to be even a little bit more bouncy than," and that was the word he used, bouncy than. I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Boys do seem to be a little bit hyper." Now, this was the beginning of an epiphany for me. And he pointed off to the horizon. He said, you see the such and such farm there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know about them?" I said, "Well, I know they're the biggest town in this area, and they employ literally like 100 people." I said, it's more like a factory than a farm." And he told me about how many cows they had there. This was dairy country, so these were milk cows. He said, "Do you know how many times a day they milk?" I said, "No, I really don't know much about their operation." He said, "They milk 4 times a day." He said, "That's literally why," he said, "they have employees there around the clock." He said, "It's a 24-hour operation. They milk 4 times a day." I said, "That's a lot of cows." He said, No, they milk the same cows 4 times a day." Now, immediately, something about that didn't sound right to me. And he could tell by the expression on my face that didn't register with me. And he said, "You do understand." He said, "The good Lord made cows to be milked twice a day, in the morning and in the late afternoon. That was the way the good Lord designed them." He said, "What they're doing up there," he said, "they're pumping the cows full of steroids, full of drugs." He said, "They're literally making them like super cows." And he said, "They'll milk them 4 times a day." And he said, literally within 6 months, they kill them, and a whole new crop of livestock comes in to replace them. He said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "Maybe you could ask your science teachers at your school this question. All those steroids and drugs they're pumping into those cows, any chance any of that's going into the milk?" Are you hearing this? He said, "It's going into the milk, He said, I'm certain, and he gives, again, I'm not a scientist, but he said, I'll bet that might have a little different effect on boys than it does girls. They're putting it on their cereal. They're drinking it. They're bringing it to school in a thermos and drinking it. And then he said, we wonder why they're bouncing off the walls. He said, it isn't just the red dye in the fruit punch. And with that, he walked on into the convenience store. And I stood there and thought, how did we miss this? How did we miss this? They're eating and they're drinking processed food. You think about even the food that gets juiced up to make the chickens bigger, juiced up to make the beef cattle bigger. The kids eat it, they drink it. It chemically works differently in boys than girls, because again, there is a difference between boys and girls. That's real science. And then how do we treat it? By consistent discipline and rules and not feeding them that crapola? No! We shove more drugs down their throat. And then someone got the bright idea, hey, this is making the boys docile, less toxic, masculine. So it behooved an entire profession to find lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of boys who are ADD, ADHD, and the prescriptions started flying. And Big Pharma realized we now have a generation, they want a pill for everything. So it behooves them to keep coming up with more things. We need boosters and vaccines and pills for. Not to mention, some of the real warped individuals in this have decided what a great way to alter and change the races and the genders we don't want anymore. You think about that.